The reason why I think I didn't prioritize growth is because I started to see monetization happen. And I said, oh, I don't need to have 1 million followers to be able to make 6 figures in brand partnerships.
Let's talk about TikTok. Friends in our virtual studio and folks listening at home, a very warm Buffery welcome. My name is Kirsty Lang. I am a senior content writer at Buffer, and today we are going to talk about TikTok, growth, and monetization. Joining me in the virtual studio is Tiffany Yu. Tiffany, thank you so much for making time for us today.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. Tiffany is incredible. I have been following her on TikTok for some time, and she is one of my favorite people that shows up in my following feed. So Tiffany is the founder of Diversibility, an award-winning social enterprise to elevate disability pride and the author of the Anti-Ableist Manifesto. She is also a phenomenal creator on TikTok, as I mentioned, boasting at the time of recording this more than 132,000 followers. I'm sure Tiffany, by the time this episode drops, that number is going to be a lot higher, which is what we're going to get into today. So I think a great place to start would be just to kind of learn about your TikTok journey. What made you decide to take the plunge and set up a TikTok account?
Yeah, so probably like many other people, I downloaded TikTok in March of 2020. One of my other creative projects at the time was I wanted to start a podcast. And one of the people I had on the podcast, at the end of the podcast, she said, "You got to get on TikTok." And I remember reflecting and I was like, well, I don't do lip syncing or dancing. I'm not really quite sure. But I started recording a couple of videos, but it didn't really stick. So I forgot about it until July of 2020, where I started to see a lot of friends start to post about how they had joined something called the Creative Learning Fund. And this was an initiative that TikTok had launched to get more educational content onto the platform. And I ended up finding one of the agencies who was connected to this program. And I slid into their DMs and I said, "Hey, I'm a disability advocate. I want to know if I'm a good fit for this." And they said, "Oh, you'd be perfect." And so initially, you can actually find my first ever, and this was under the hashtag Learn on TikTok. In July of 2020, I posted my first Learn on TikTok. And I said, "Hey, I'm going to share entrepreneurial leadership tips, etc." And after a couple of days or maybe a week or two of doing that, the agency had been looking at my content and they said, "Hey, Tiffany, I know on some of the other platforms you post about disability advocacy. Would you be interested in posting more content around that?" And interestingly enough, I didn't think to lead with that on TikTok because I thought it might be too niche. But I found out that that niche was essentially my pathway to success on TikTok. So I started posting two different types of disability content. One was I'm someone who I got into a car accident when I was a kid. One of my arms is permanently paralyzed. And I started posting what I call paralyzed arm content. So I was just sharing different things that I do and how I do them with one arm. And I found that it really resonated with people who not only also had paralyzed arms, but maybe had other upper extremity disabilities. Like maybe they were recovering from a stroke or were an amputee. But it also resonated with occupational therapists or people working in the rehabilitation space who wanted to better serve disabled patients or disabled clients who were coming through. And it also resonated with people who didn't share that disability, but wanted to or had never seen someone who had my disability before.
Mm,
So in the first month, I saw myself going from maybe like 700 followers to 45,000 in a month. I thought that was
that's
the pace
crazy.
at which, yeah, I thought that was the pace at which I was going to grow every single
Yeah. Oh,
month.
we're doing this now.
Um, but the second type of content was more disability advocacy content, which is kind of
Mm,
uh, what I had been doing for almost 10 years, or had been doing for a little over 10 years at that particular point in time. So it was sharing different things about language, statistics, maybe people didn't know, um, things that we say that we might not know are ableist, different definitions, daily interactions. And I ended up writing a piece on Buffer about this, about how then these monetization opportunities came. But I guess I'll start there, where it started
Yeah.
between this March to July timeframe of starting to create short form video content, which I had never done before. I had only done, the static images that you had previously seen on Instagram, to now this new creative foray into what can I talk about for 15 to 30 seconds at a time.
Yeah, I mean, that in itself is incredibly difficult. I cannot make a video under 90 seconds. Yeah. I mean, and that was the early days of TikTok, right? I mean, the early days, but you could only post. What was the limit then? I think it was 30 seconds, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah, I think it was I mean, you could filter it 15, 30, 60, and now they are prioritizing content that is
Yeah,
more than a minute long.
yeah, absolutely. I've heard that they're going to start like, I mean, I'm going over the tangent now, but I mean, 30-minute content. Now, TikTok is going long form, YouTube is going short form, Instagram's in the middle. They're not really sure. Um, but yeah, no, that is absolutely fascinating. That is, and also just Tiffany mentioned the article that she wrote for Buffer. It is a fantastic read. And that is, when I read it, I was like, I need to get Tiffany on Buffer Chat because TikTok is just, and your point that you made earlier really resonated with me is that oh, I need a TikTok, am I going to be dancing, is that how am I going to get my message across if I have to lip sync? And that is not the case at all. I think that is a huge misconception, and TikTok, it can be a scary place, but it can also be a wonderful place to find your niche. And because of the volume of people who are on there and excited about TikTok and excited about your niche, I don't know. I think it is a wonderful place to build community when you do it right. So before I go off on any more tangents, um, something you did mention in your article, Tiffany, and I just like want to be like clear on this. Being part of that program that you referenced earlier, it didn't come with any kind of boost in the algorithm. There was nothing like that at all. You were using the hashtag, but you were just functioning as a regular user. It didn't mean you suddenly got a leg up when you hit that 45,000 follower mark.
Yeah, I think I remember as I was writing it and I got that feedback about like if we got the boost, the best thing I got out of the program was what I call my TikTok friends. And so I was part of this program alongside so many other educational creators. And these were musicians who were teaching people about their art. These were DIY creators who were showing you how to create paintings, science creators, and so I looked at some of the other creators who were in the platform who did not have the same level of growth, and I can't confirm whether I got a boost or not, but if I look at me versus some of the other creators who were also in the platform, some of us did have really great growth. Some of us grew slowly, but are still maybe in the hundreds or haven't reached that 10K follower mark. But I will also share we were also paid a small stipend for that
Yeah.
program as well.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, we're going to get into monetization after we talk about growth because I think growth really needs to come first in many senses. So I think for a lot of folks listening to this, a lot of people, they're kind of active on TikTok. They're, in the, as you mentioned, they're a couple of hundred followers, maybe in 200 view jail. And it can be quite disheartening because it does take a lot of effort to create TikToks, especially if you're trying to be consistent with it. So what I'd love to find out, Tiffany, if you were going to start a completely new TikTok account today and you were really focused on growth, what are some of the things that you would put into place right from the start?
Ooh. I'm going to say something a little provocative, which is
Okay.
I never joined TikTok for the growth. I don't even
Okay.
look at my analytics. I'm probably caught in my current 500 view jail. Um, so, what I realized though was I didn't feel like because I actually feel like I haven't really grown that much recently. And in full transparency, I'm currently in the middle of my book launch, so it's been a little harder to create create consistent video
Yeah.
content. But I guess what I'll say is I would figure out. So in my early days, there were a couple things that I made sure that I did, which is I had series so that I always had consistent content coming out. And now TikTok has this feature where you can create playlists. So you can create day in the life content where you put together a bunch of different video clips and then do a voiceover. Or some people put together a bunch of video clips just with music. And then the second thing I did was so that was just me knowing that I would have consistent video content because people are going to want to follow you if they go to your channel and they see that you're posting stuff. Because if you're not posting stuff consistently, and consistently can mean something different, it could mean a couple of times a week, it could mean 3 times a day. If you are looking for growth, and this is what I've heard from other people, you're going to want to be posting at least once a day or multiple times a day. The next thing you're going to want to do is make sure you're engaging with a lot of the comments. And what that encourages people to do is they know that you're there and available. And I remember my first viral video, I think it got 1.7 million views, hundreds of comments, literally all pretty much saying almost the same thing. I responded to every single one of them. Now I barely respond. I barely respond to anything. There was something I heard recently called post and ghost. But if you're a
Oh
much
yeah,
larger creator
guilty.
who gets very inundated and overwhelmed with comments, then maybe that makes sense. But if you're still early and looking for growth, um, the reason why I think I didn't prioritize growth is because I started to see monetization happen. And I said, oh, I don't need to have a million followers to be able to make 6 figures in brand partnerships. Um, and and now, with some uncertainty around TikTok here in the US,
Yeah,
one trend we are seeing is a lot of people going from being single platform creators. This was probably during the peak of the YouTube era to now multi-platform creators where we're all posting on all different content because we don't own any of these, right? Essentially it's like free marketing space. But yeah, I think I'll share just those two things. Other people will tell you about the hook in the first 3 seconds, but I don't know. I don't know if I ever. Yeah, I'm a little bit of a different creator. For me, it was interesting because a couple of years ago I said, my goal is to reach 100,000 followers. And then I did. And while most other creators might be like, okay, my next goal is 200 or my next goal is 500 or a million, I never really felt super compelled to reach the next milestone. Like, I actually feel very good with where I am. I don't have that many views, but I'm okay with it because I got a book. I have what I call like a portfolio career, and this is something I also encourage other creators to do is we can't just 100% depend on brand partnerships. Maybe we can start speaking. Maybe we start a podcast that has more advertising opportunities, more opportunities for long form content. Maybe there are other ways that we can monetize as well.
yeah. I love that point that you just made because it's that shift to owned media, right? Because you don't own your TikTok face. Like it's your content. But if you know what is going to happen with this TikTok ban, nobody really knows. And that's going to have a huge impact on people. But if there are other places people can find you, then, you're a lot safer. You've given yourself a bit of a moat. That makes a lot of sense. I do want to pull on a thread that you mentioned earlier. I don't need to have hundreds of thousands of followers to start monetizing. How did that process start to happen for you? I love that you raised that because I think it it can give hope to so many folks. I've recently started monetizing, I mean, in a very, very tiny way on LinkedIn. And it's
Ooh.
great. I don't have a ton of followers, but I think I found a good niche, and the audience that I've cultivated there is engaged, and that is what brands want to see more than these crazy numbers. And on TikTok, sorry, I'm just nattering away here, but on TikTok, having 100,000 followers or two, whatever the case is, it doesn't guarantee that level of viewership because of the way people use TikTok. So yeah, I back to it, like how you kind of when that realization dawned, hey, I can make money with where I'm at.
Mm. I will say that I think I had a mini series on TikTok where I was going into a transparency around different brand partnerships that I've done. And I got a message, or I think I got two messages from friends who have over 1 million followers on TikTok who have never done a brand deal, right? So that is also to say that that's why my that's why I think I would encourage whoever is watching this to really hone in on what your goals are on the platform. So, growth, yes, is important for me from an advocacy perspective to be able to reach more people. Growth is helpful for me to be able to find more community members, to find other people in the disability community, and growth may also be helpful for potentially larger brand deals. But I feel good with where I am. So that said, right when I had that spurt of growth from that 700 followers to that 45,000, I got my first brand deal. And the reason why I mentioned my friends who have over 1 million followers is because I feel like the type of content I make does make it easy to integrate a brand in one way or another. Because
Mm,
it's very odd, or it can feel not genuine or not authentic if you have a certain type of way that you do content and then all of a sudden you have an ad that is confusing. So this is why like having the different series, doing different types of content helps it so that brands can help envision themselves into how they'll integrate within your content. But the first brand deal was from a laundry detergent company. And my angle was that for some other laundry detergents that are in this big, bulky plastic container, if you can only use one hand, it does make it hard. It's heavy, and the
yeah.
way the handle is pretty rigid, so that it's harder to carry. Uh, and while the laundry detergent company that I ended up doing the brand deal with was more focused on their sustainability efforts, which I do love as well, right? The packaging, the plastic packaging is not helpful. So their packaging was like cardboard and smaller. My angle was very niche, was very specific,
Yeah.
right? And not only did they get to lean into, hey, not only is this good for the environment, it's also one hand friendly. And it's these little pods. So that became my first brand deal. And that was for $2,000, if we're going to be totally transparent.
We
And
love pay transparency at Buffett, so thank you for sharing.
and then I think about like my first 10K deal, which came in 2021, so that was about a year later. And my highest paying deal was for 48K for a much larger partnership. But again, I think about multi-platform. So some of those were on TikTok, some of those were native content for the brand, some of those were on Instagram. But I'm like, here I am with, I still considered a smaller following because if I look at my TikTok friends, a lot of them have millions of followers, 2 million followers, 5 million followers. And I feel grateful that I'm still in their orbit. But we all started together. We've all had different trajectories. And I got a six-figure book deal, right? And so yeah, I kind of take a step back and I said, for me, creating content was a way to create more sustainability around supporting my livelihood as a disability advocate. Prior to being able to monetize on these platforms, I was Airbnbing out my apartment and selling jewelry and upselling furniture that I got for free on Craigslist from people who are moving away. And I don't want to like gloss over those parts because it also goes to show that there are monetization opportunities everywhere.
Yeah.
But now I don't have to Airbnb out my apartment. No shade to Airbnb, but um, now I can be in my own space and have this creator income coming in, talking about something that I really care about, and also aligning myself with brands and finding angles that are specific to me. So what was interesting was I've done a one of my favorite partnerships was with a hotel brand, And a lot of my friends were like, "Oh, like, are you doing it from to talk about accessibility at the hotels?" And my angle throughout all of that content with the hotel brand was being able to find spaces away from home that I could work on my book, right? So it's also, yes, I'm niche in that I do create disability content, but people through TikTok, TikTok is all built on authenticity and wanting to get to know who you are.
Mm,
People have a better understanding of who Tiffany is as a person. She's also writing a book. Tiffany's book is the first draft of the book was written using speech to text, which also means maybe you need a private, quiet space where you're talking out loud for long periods of time if you're writing your book. And oh, a hotel room is great to get those
sounds
creative
wonderful.
juices.
Sign me up. I'm
So
sold.
yeah, so I just thought about all of that. It very specific to me. I don't want to go out speaking on behalf of the disability community. I'm not a wheelchair user. I don't have a service
Yeah.
animal. Those aren't things that I can talk about in relation to traveling and things like that. But I do travel a lot to for speaking engagements or especially working on the book or going to visit my family and things like that. So yeah, that was long-winded, but I wanted to highlight that I think for me, my journey onto TikTok and my journey into creating content was more because I wanted to explore this aspect of my creativity around creating video
Mm,
content. And I really wanted to make sure that it felt fun. And this is also part of the reason why I haven't made a foray into becoming a full-time content creator, because I feel like that's too much pressure and it would lose the fun. Because part of the awe in full transparency is, again, one of my arms is paralyzed, is that I couldn't believe, and sometimes I would just giggle to myself that I'm creating video content with one hand and people are paying me, and I film everything. I'm a team of one. I do think, I think it's important to talk about that part too, where maybe you
mm.
do reach some milestone where you start to hire editors and other things like that. And no, I'm there setting up all the different angles with my tripod, adding all the captions in, editing them, editing the content from my bed, and that. But yeah, I started to take the pressure off a little bit. I think there's a period of
Mm.
time where I was like, hey, I want to post on TikTok every single day. And then with other demands coming in, book deadlines, book events, different things like that, I had to take a step back and say, I'm going to show up here where I can and um and and do it in a way that works best for me.
I love that. And I love that you kind of flagged that it, especially if you're a team of one and you are like ideating, filming, editing. Oh gosh, the editing, me and video editing, we're best friends, but I also, we're not. Um, but yeah, so I mean, that process, I embarked on my own TikTok challenge a couple of months back and I was creating a video every day. And sometimes it could take up to like 4 or 5 hours a day of just making one video, because sometimes you'll create a video and it's like it'll be much easier and quicker than you envisioned when you set out to create it, and other times it's the complete opposite and you end up getting bogged down in editing and filming, and yeah, and that frustration can really rain on the creative juices as well, because it is a form of art. You are making something with a
Yeah.
message, and I think that's a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I was going to say find formats that work for you. So I will say in the early days, and I still have friends who are spending 4 to 5 hours editing a 30-second TikTok, which is
I
great if
can't
that's
take
what you
that
want to
long.
do. And then I see friends who are more fashion creators and are doing these transition videos. I I I I personally don't have time for that. And I think a lot of your audience, they're business owners too, right? So you
Yes.
don't have as much time. So I thought about what are some formats that do not take 4 to 5 hours of editing. So one format to me is just speaking direct to camera. And I actually used to do most of my TikTok editing direct in app. Like some of their editing features just make it so easy. They're very
Yeah.
intuitive. I have never opened Adobe Premiere. Like I do not. I do not know any of
Same.
those advanced tools. So this is for the DIY business owner out there who wants to create content. So one is me talking to camera. Two is me recording 3-second videos and stitching them together with either some music or a sound or a voiceover. And then the last type of video is me recording myself doing something with a voiceover. So those already right that there are 3 different video formats that you can create some, you know, you can either integrate brand partnerships into or integrate so that people can visually view different things as well. But
Yeah, that's such a great shout.
none of those formats take 3 to 4 hours to edit.
Yeah, unless you are me and you have to film yourself talking to the camera at least 30 times to sound like a coherent human being, which is why voiceovers are amazing. They are such a great time saver if you're creating on TikTok. And something else that I think is really worth flagging about TikTok is that when people set out, I think it's, my generation, like elder millennial, we came of age with Instagram, and we expect everything to be aesthetic and polished. And TikTok doesn't require that at all. Some of my Gen Z friends who are creating on there, I'm like, but there's no what is, and then hundreds of thousands of views for videos that are just like really authentic, and that's something that you mentioned as well. TikTok followers want to get to know you in a way that they don't necessarily on a more aspirational platform. So
Yeah.
that was a good question, Kirsty. Thank you so much. I just want to go back to my questions list because I'm going off on tangents. TikTok is just, I could talk about this for days. Okay, so you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but is there anything else you would like to share about folks, whether they're business owners or they are creators and they are looking to make money on TikTok? What advice would you give to them beyond what you've already said?
I will say I'm going to say the thing that I don't do first and then and then I'll go into some tips.
Do
So
what
the
I say, not what I do.
so the thing that I don't do is I have heard that one of the trends in the future may be around what is called social selling. So this is the emergence of TikTok shop, YouTube shopping. I don't want my and there are some really incredible affiliate opportunities with those. And I think if you are a small business owner, there is an opportunity to really lean into TikTok shop. And I have some of my friends who are small business owners who make essentially 90% of their sales on TikTok shop. So that's the thing I don't do because I don't have time for that. And I don't necessarily, I haven't yet unlocked the value of affiliates. You can
Okay.
invite someone else onto the podcast to talk about that. So, and I didn't want my channel to turn into QVC just yet. I've been invited by a couple of these different social selling platforms to like come into their studio and do a whole day. And one of the things I'm learning about myself is I don't know if it's I don't know if it's me as an introvert or if it's disability related, but I find that while I love showing up on podcasts and I love doing speaking engagements, it takes a lot of energy. And then I
Yeah.
do need time to recharge. And one of the things that I noticed was that when I was live streaming more frequently on TikTok, it would take up the same amount of energy that I could be using somewhere else. So that's the first. Then the next I'll share is provide a way that it's easy for people to get in contact with you. So that means putting your email address in your bio or having a link to a website that has your email address or a contact form readily available.
Yes.
And one of the things I had, so originally on Instagram, there's an option where if you go to someone's profile, you'll see message and then email. But for a lot of brands that are looking, they're looking mainly on web. So they don't have access to that email button. So just making sure that it's available
I
there.
didn't know that. That's such a great point. That's marketing 101. Remove the friction.
Remove the friction.
Mm.
Number two is you need to let people know that you are open to doing brand partnerships. And one way to do that is if you do have a website, or you'll sometimes see on people's profiles that even if they do put their email address on there, it'll say brands, colon, and then their email. One way that I did it was I started joining a couple what are called like influence marketplaces
Mhm.
where, and these are generally a little bit of a lower rate, where brands know that they're looking for content creators and they end up posting the opportunity on these different brand marketplaces. Sometimes if you're earlier on in your journey, it may be, hey, we'll gift you this in exchange for, if you like it, you can end up posting something about it. So so joining some of those, but then you can also, and there are mixed views around this, you can also tag the brands in content that you're on. So I remember I had, and actually I shared this in the article. One question I got was, "Hey, how do you handle payments and invoicing?" And there was a tool that I really liked using. So I made a video I made a video with response. So that's one way to kind of engage with your audience, is you can either comment in response to them or create a video. And then I or my rep then reached out to the brand because I said, "Hey, like I saw that this brand has done partnerships with a couple other creators that have partnered. Do you think we could reach out to see if they'd be interested in me doing a partnership with them?" And so it was already something that I use. I've actually done this, I think, twice so far, or probably more than twice. I would have to go back and check, but I can remember two instances where there's a product that I already use and love and talk about all the time, and I ended up doing a partnership with them. And the partnership, or sorry, the content that I created for both of these paid collaborations was very different for both. So one of them was a bunch of B-roll, a bunch of those 3 seconds videos stitched
Mhm.
together with voiceover. And then for the other brand, it was more speaking directly to video about how I use this invoicing platform. So so those are, I guess those are the tips. Let me think if I can think of any other tips. But I think what's fascinating now is there's an opportunity where if you do tag a brand or something, they'll like get a DM notification that you're like on their radar. And there are some brands that I've been like tagging for years now, but I just love the product that I'm
Yeah,
using or whatever I'm wearing. So, but yeah, removing the friction. And then the last thing I'll add is including your location. I think is a helpful one if you want to do more with local businesses or local
yeah.
activations or events that are happening.
Yeah, I love that because that kind of further niches you down as well. And I also do, just as someone who has also been involved in on the other side of things in booking creators and influencers, that is the kind of the gold standard partnership when you find someone who is already a fan and using the product and is able to talk about it intelligently. Those are the best partnerships because they're the most authentic. So I love what you said about that. I think that would be, if I was looking to kind of build out a new creator program, that would be my first step, is what creators are already looking and are already using the product or using the what I want to market. And then because that, I mean, even that, if they're a micro influencer or a nano influencer, that already carries more weight for me than someone with millions of followers who has never heard of the product before. So
Mm.
I think that's a great tip. Tiffany, thank you so much for that wonderful advice. Is there anything that you think we have missed for folks who are looking to monetize on TikTok, or folks, business owners who are looking to leverage TikTok to help, you know, support their work as you have been doing?
I guess I would reiterate that even as a business owner, there are, or I guess I'll say two things. And one is the way that the article closed is that if you do not enjoy creating video content, then do not create on TikTok just because you have
Yeah,
an opportunity to go viral. Figure out like what your preferred method is. So for some people, they really enjoy writing. So maybe they have a Substack and created a community there. Or maybe you're like me and really enjoy taking photos. And so even though Instagram has been pushing reels, I'm still posting static photos. Or maybe you want to share business lessons, but like image, video, you want to be able to do them all, and you can do them on LinkedIn. um and so, and also I guess think about where your target customer is going to be. And so as I think about even with a book out, on a grassroots level, yes, TikTok, yes, Instagram, but for bulk purchases, LinkedIn, who are looking to get books um, for their employees, things like that. And then the second thing I'll say is to just remember that there are so many different ways to monetize. So even as I think about, I know we spent a lot of time talking about brand partnerships, but there are two other I actually track it
Yes.
all in the spreadsheet. So in addition to the brand partnerships, I also will sometimes do what I call like fellowships or creator programs, or sometimes some of these platforms will offer bonuses for um, either a certain number of views or number of times you're posting, or actually, I don't know how some of those platform monetization opportunities work, but they are there. And then the third is more like features. So like people who want to use your likeness for something, maybe like as a brand ambassador. So you're not necessarily like creating content for them, but maybe you're doing a shoot for them, or they're coming in and creating the content. And you kind of like UGC, how people would understand UGC, but a little bit different because depending on who you are, like I feel like I had a strong personal brand first,
Yeah.
and I'm able to leverage that strong personal brand to be able to uh, do this like UGC asterisk type content where I'm not necessarily like a UGC creator, but they're leveraging my personal brand in alignment with their brand to share something that they're working on.
Yeah.
So
That
just
makes
think about
so much
all the
sense.
different ways. What's that?
Yeah, I was going to say that makes so much sense. There are many ways to monetization, especially on a platform like TikTok as well. And, as there are many ways to monetize in real life, whether that's Airbnb or creating content. Tiffany, thank you so much for this. This has been so great to chat. I mean, I've been zeroing in on LinkedIn lately because, as you mentioned, video is, maybe that's not something you can stick to consistently. And LinkedIn has been my favorite platform because I can post text there. But now, after this conversation, I'm feeling re energized about TikTok. So I think my dormant account is going to see some activity. Um, yes, your article that you mentioned on the Buffer blog, we will link to it below in the show notes, is wonderful. There is a lot of depth in here that we didn't have in there that we didn't have time to cover today. Definitely read it, and you can find Tiffany, of course, on TikTok. And we'll include all of Tiffany's links as well, and her website and her book, which looks phenomenal. And yeah, that is all the things, Tiffany. Thank you so so much for making the time today. I really appreciate it, and I hope you can decompress because I know podcasts take energy.